As Canada's housing bubble fractures, it's important to look at the past to get an idea and understanding of what could happen in the future. And if we look at the past, what has happened with population growth, housing starts, we can actually see that there is actually a chance that we could have a rising population coupled with declining home prices, because it's happened before, and it's happened before in Canada. So let's get right into it as I show you what I'm talking about. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the period between 1977 and 1985, and the population increased by 8.89% during that period. So what's really interesting is the chart that we're looking at here is housing starts. And between 1977 and 1985, housing starts crashed by 70%. Just think about that for a second. 70% decline in housing starts, whilst the population grew by 8.89%. So you would think housing prices to the moon? Well, no, that is not the case at all. What happened? So let's get right into it and let me show you, in fact, what happened. So if we go back to this period here between 1977 and 1985, basically you can see that home prices were at the index of 48.51 in real terms. And then by 1985, they were at 40. They declined by 20% during that period. So housing starts absolutely crashed. You had population growth that was really strong, and you had home prices in real terms going down. So it's really interesting to think about that for a second, because that could actually happen to a certain extent in Canada today. Now, I would argue the differences are quite stark between then and now, because back then you had very strong income growth, whereas now we have completely negative income growth, as I've pointed to many times before. With our negative income growth, we are really in a much worse position than they were during this period that we're studying right now. So the fact is, there was more cause for prices to actually rise back then than there is actually now. Now, I'm not saying that this doesn't have an effect on the housing market, bringing such a high amount of people. It can actually send it even more speculative, because you'll just get more people here in Canada who think, wow, I want to capitalize on the new people coming in. I want to become a landlord. And they'll go out and buy investment properties to keep up with that rental demand. But as we know, in most major cities in Canada right now, you would be cash flow negative if you bought that investment property. But we have to remember, a lot of people are buying because they're buying for that future price growth. And it's been like that, this highly speculative market, since pretty much 2018. So it's very interesting to look at this further, because you really begin to understand the dynamics of what's going on. Because if you look at this chart again, just so I can show you, from 77, which is right here, to 85, you literally had the index go down. This is real residential property prices for Canada from Fred economic data. And then you look at some of the articles that we've seen. We went through this a couple of weeks ago. We've seen a lot of articles like this, which is housing stock grew faster than population in Vancouver and Toronto. So this is really interesting when you think about it, because guess what? If a housing stock is growing faster than the population, obviously it creates a surplus there. And a lot of that surplus has been absorbed by Airbnb. And not only that, we are in a deficit right now. And that is one thing that I'll admit, the massive amounts of immigration that we've seen, particularly over last year and this year, they have meant the population growth has surpassed what the housing market can keep up with in terms of building. So there is definitely a deficit of homes, and I'm not arguing that there isn't a deficit of homes. But what you have essentially been led to believe by politicians, by the mainstream media, is this has always been the case. That is why prices are just so high in Canada. It's just because the population is growing so much, and that is utter bullshit. It is complete bullshit, and it is not true. It's not based on fact. The reason why housing prices are so high in Canada comes down to that speculative component. It comes down to things like the CMHC, who's essentially been subsidizing mortgages, creating massive amounts of moral hazard, encouraging the banks to lend to riskier and riskier clients because they don't care. They've been offloading that risk to the taxpayer. You've also had home equity lines of credit it, people doing cash out refis that just contribute and contribute more. I mean, if you just banned home equity lines of credit, you didn't allow people to do cash out refis, and then you also got rid of the CMHC, you wouldn't have a housing bubble anymore. I can tell you that right now. And you would be seeing home prices absolutely crashing. And that is just by tackling the demand side of the equation instead of looking at the supply side. Now, I look at both sides of the equation. I'm not biased, and I look at both sides. Whereas the politicians, whether it's Pierre or Trudeau, they look at just one side, which is supply. They constantly harp on about it and bang on about it. And it's because it sounds logical, and it pisses me the fuck off, because I'm just like, you guys, do you think we're stupid? But the fact is, a lot of people are stupid because they hear something, it sounds logical, so they think, oh yeah, makes sense, it's logical, so that must be the case, when it's actually, there's many more things to this equation than just the supply. I mean, God, just look at the demand side of the equation as well. So when you put two and two together, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that demand has been incredibly high due to these products, home equity lines of credit, cash out refis, the CMHC moral hazard that has been created. I mean, the banks, they just do not price the risk like they should when it comes to mortgages. And a lot of that is because of the CMHC. Now, that will be a disaster long term, as I'm sure a lot of you can understand. The CMHC and putting all that risk onto the taxpayer comes with trade-offs. And one of the trade-offs is moral hazard. So now, what will population growth do immediately is it will send rents up, because you'll basically have a lot of these people are coming from developing countries. They're not coming from developed countries. They're not coming with bags of cash. Yes, you've got money launderers that are coming from China with bags of cash, but they are few and far between compared to the hundreds of thousands of people that are coming from developing countries with relatively little money. So the thing is, they're just going to go into these rentals here, drive up the cost, because they will share with more and more people because they come from a developing country. So they're prepared to accept lower living standards. In fact, that might even be a bump up in their living standards compared to what they had back home. I mean, who knows? That's why they're supposedly coming here for a better life. But a lot of them are also ending up on the streets as well. They can't even find these rentals. So, you know, it's kind of crazy, but this is what you would actually expect. The first thing it would have an impact on is rents. But because Canada's housing market is so speculative, guys, you have to remember that, guess what? Rents are still not paying the mortgage. They're not paying the mortgages plus expenses because Canada's housing market got so speculative. The prices are just completely out of whack with reality. And this just shows it, because even with the massive amounts of immigration that we see right now, we still have not got positive cash flow rentals in Canada because the prices have just got that stupid. And it just goes to show that there is a lot of potential declines on the way, because eventually you are going to have the market correct to reality. And that will also bring down the economy with it, because we know all about the housing dependence that Canada's economy has. So it's absolutely insane, guys, what's really going on here. And I find it incredibly interesting to look at these historical data points and then kind of see what was going on in the past so we can compare it to what was going on right now. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, you might like this playlist here, you might like this video here. If you're looking for a VPN, you know where to go. Go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. That's my VPN provider. I will see you in the next one, guys. Take care of yourselves.